When you hear the name Mark Cuban, what comes to mind? Billionaire entrepreneur, Shark Tank mogul, Maverick NBA team owner? Mark Cuban's story is often celebrated as a quintessential tale of self-made success. But what if I told you that one of his biggest claims to fame, the invention of internet streaming, might not be the whole truth?
One of my buddies from college, Todd Wagner, sat down with me, and this was in 1995. He was like, there's this whole new thing called the internet. There's got to be a way we can use this to listen to Indiana basketball. We set up this website called AudioNet, and the next thing you know, video comes along and we turned it into a company called Broadcast.com. And so we started what turned out to be the very first streaming company.
Today, we're diving into the fascinating and often contentious history of how Mark Cuban rose to prominence, the real story behind AudioNet and Broadcast.com, and the unsung heroes who paved the way for streaming technology. Let's start from the beginning, unraveling the story layer by layer. Get ready because this one's a wild ride. Mark Cuban's road to billionaire status began with an idea, a simple but game-changing concept, streaming audio over the internet. In the mid-1990s, Cuban and his college friend Todd Wagner launched AudioNet, a platform designed to let users listen to live radio broadcasts online. By all accounts, it was a groundbreaking business idea. Cuban and Wagner would later rebrand AudioNet as Broadcast.com, sell it to Yahoo for a jaw-dropping $5.7 billion, and secure their places in the tech industry's Hall of Fame. But AudioNet didn't emerge out of thin air, nor was Cuban the sole mastermind behind its inception. To understand the full picture, we need to rewind a few years and talk about Chris Jaeb, the original founder of what would eventually become AudioNet. Chris Jaeb was an entrepreneur and visionary who founded Cameron Audio Networks in 1989. His early work involved experimenting with audio broadcasting technologies, including attempts to transmit audio to radio pagers. By 1994, Jaeb had shifted his focus to the internet, recognizing its potential as a platform for streaming audio content. In late 1994, Jaeb met Mark Cuban and Todd Wagner through mutual connections. At the time, Cuban was a successful entrepreneur with a background in computer systems, while Wagner was a corporate lawyer. Impressed by Jaeb's vision, Cuban invested $10,000 in the project, acquiring a 2% stake in the company.
Within 10 minutes of me giving him this pitch that I'd given 100 times, Mark said, "I'm in, I'll do it." And at that point, he gave me a check for $10,000 and said, and on the bottom of that check, it said 2% of the company. And at the time, I really didn't think anything of it, so I took the check.
Jaeb's contributions were critical in the early days. He secured broadcasting rights from radio stations, laid the groundwork for the business model, and began exploring the technical requirements for streaming. Yet as the company grew, Cuban and Wagner gradually took control, sidelining Jaeb in the process. By 1995, Jaeb had sold the majority of his shares and stepped away from the company entirely. Today, Jaeb's role in the creation of AudioNet is often overlooked. While Cuban and Wagner are celebrated as the founders, Jaeb's name is rarely mentioned, a glaring omission in the official narrative.
How Mark Cuban came into the story, but I'm wondering are you ever resentful that people say that Mark Cuban is the founder and completely write you out of the story?
Yeah, of course, there's a little bit of that. It's hard not to because of the way it sort of ended up, in it being promoted in the media, and because of the way
Mark Cuban loves to tell the story of how he and Wagner essentially invented streaming.
How much technical savvy was required? How much did you understand, could do yourself?
I did all the technology, and then we hired engineer after engineer after engineer to implement it. And so,
wow,
yeah, okay. From putting together a multicast network to software to just all these different.
According to Cuban, the idea came about when Wagner expressed frustration over not being able to listen to Indiana Hoosiers basketball games online. They decided to solve the problem themselves, launching AudioNet in 1995 and pioneering the concept of internet streaming. It's a great story, except it's not entirely true. The technology to stream audio over the internet already existed before AudioNet. In fact, Real Networks, founded by former Microsoft executive Rob Glazer, had released Real Audio Player in April 1995, months before AudioNet's debut. Real Audio Player was revolutionary, allowing users to click a link and stream audio directly from the internet. By late 1995, it was being used by major broadcasters, news outlets, and sports organizations. Cuban, however, has repeatedly claimed that streaming technology simply didn't exist before AudioNet. In interviews, he said things like, "We figured it out," or "We invented it because nobody else had done it." But the reality is more nuanced. Cuban's team didn't develop their own streaming technology from scratch. Instead, they leveraged existing tools like Real Audio Player to deliver their content. According to Wall Street Journal articles from the late 1990s, Cuban and Wagner learned about Real Network's software for streaming audio signals and decided to use it to help radio stations put their broadcasts online. This directly contradicts Cuban's narrative of invention. Over the years, Cuban has made bold claims about his technical expertise, often positioning himself as the mastermind behind AudioNet's success. In one interview, he stated, "I did all the technology," describing how he built multicast networks and custom software to enable streaming. But those who worked with Cuban tell a different story. Jeb's early efforts to secure streaming rights and explore technical solutions laid the foundation for AudioNet. Cuban's real talent was in sales and marketing. He had a knack for pitching the company's vision to investors and media outlets, framing himself as the driving force behind its success. This narrative helped Cuban overshadow Jeb and cement his reputation as a tech pioneer. To understand the broader context, we need to revisit Real Networks, the true pioneers of streaming technology. Founded in 1994, Real Networks developed the first widely adopted streaming software, Real Audio Player. The company even filed a patent for its click-to-stream technology, securing its place as a leader in the industry. By the time AudioNet launched, Real Audio Player had already gained traction, being used by 85% of streaming content providers. Cuban and Wagner didn't invent streaming. They identified an opportunity to aggregate content and monetize it using existing technology. This distinction is crucial as it highlights the difference between innovation and adaptation. In 1999, Cuban and Wagner sold Broadcast.com to Yahoo for $5.7 billion in stock. It was one of the largest tech acquisitions of the dot-com era, making Cuban a billionaire overnight. But the success of the sale overshadowed the company's operational challenges. Broadcast.com was hemorrhaging money, with negative $116 million in earnings on $22 million in sales. Within a few years, Yahoo shut down the service entirely, unable to make it profitable. For Cuban, the sale was a masterstroke. He cashed out at the peak of the dot-com bubble, securing his fortune before the market crashed. For Yaib, the outcome was bittersweet. While he profited from the sale, his contributions were largely erased from the narrative, leaving Cuban and Wagner to take all the credit. The story of AudioNet and Broadcast.com is more than a tale of entrepreneurial success. It's a lesson in how narratives are shaped and who gets to write history. Cuban's ability to control the narrative has cemented his status as a tech pioneer, even though much of his success was built on the work of others. For Chris Jeb, the erasure is particularly painful. As the original founder, Jeb had a vision for streaming that predated Cuban's involvement by years. Yet today, his name is barely mentioned in the history books, while Cuban is celebrated as a self-made billionaire. This isn't just about giving credit where it's due. It's about understanding the dynamics of power, recognition, and legacy in the tech industry. Cuban's rise to prominence is a reminder that success isn't always about who has the best idea. It's often about who tells the best story. So what do we make of Mark Cuban's claims about inventing streaming? While there's no denying his business acumen and ability to capitalize on opportunities, the idea that he single-handedly invented streaming is at best an oversimplification and at worst a distortion of the truth. The real story is one of collaboration, adaptation, and opportunism. Cuban may not have invented streaming, but he recognized its potential and turned it into a billion-dollar business. And while that's an impressive achievement, it's important to remember the people and technologies that made it possible. As we reflect on Cuban's legacy, let's not forget the contributions of Chris Jeb, Real Networks, and the many unsung heroes who paved the way for the streaming revolution. Their stories deserve to be told too.
You started that.
It was called AudioNet, and we started in 1995.
Technology even there?
No, it wasn't at that point, but I figured I could figure it out. And there were ways using WAV files and stuff that you could transmit audio. That had been done for a long time. But actually streaming it over the internet in a more efficient manner, that hadn't been done. So I set up a website, and we called it AudioNet, and then we went to a local radio station here in